back to the channel. I recently attended a Formula One race down in Austin, Texas. So what we're going to cover today is what to expect on a Formula One race weekend. Now, some of this will be specific to Austin, Texas, simply because that's where I was in attendance, but let's get to it. Number one, everything will be booked. Let me preface this by saying that Austin was not only the most popular race this year, it was the most popular race in the history of Formula One. There were over 400,000 people in attendance over the course of the 3 days. As a result of that, hotels and Airbnbs were all booked solid. Flights were also booked solid, and we had an extremely hard time finding a rental car at all. And when I went to pick it up, they actually didn't want to give it to us at our original reservation price, but I'll cover a little bit more on that later. Uber rides were in high demand and prices reflected that, and they were also hard to catch because it was such a large event. Make your reservations as early as you possibly can. People literally drove to the racetrack using U-Haul moving trucks because it was the only transportation they could find. And I don't even mean like the F-150s, I mean like those full jumbo size moving vans slash like small utility trucks. Okay, like they also use the pickup trucks, but even like those massive moving vans, there were plenty of those in the parking lot. It was an absolute free-for-all. Which brings me to expectation number 2. Price gouging. Listen, I know that it's capitalism, and I understand that a massive increase in demand with the same limited supply will increase prices. I didn't know I would be attending this race until after tickets went on sale. My friends and I kind of booked everything as soon as we purchased the tickets. But once tickets went on sale, prices were already astronomical at that point. For example, I flew in from New England to Texas, and typically that flight is around $450 round trip when booked that far in advance. I ended up flying in about 2 days early and leaving 2 days later to get the cheapest flight that I could, and the least expensive flight was still $800. It was literally cheaper to stay the extra couple nights before and after in the cheapest hotel I could find than it was to fly in and out on the highest demand days where flights were consistently priced at $1,600 and up. And remember that rental car that I had trouble picking up at the airport? Well, Hertz didn't want to honor our initial reservation, and they literally tried to add a zero to our price. And that's not an exaggeration, by the way. Our initial price was about $275 for 5 days, and when we got there and picked it up, they tried to increase that price to about $2,700. Now, fortunately, somebody else in our group was able to take over the reservation through his company and lock in the same rate, but he didn't fly in until a day later than the rest of us, which means we had no car that day, and now the hard to schedule Ubers were a bigger issue. Fortunately, we did find an Airbnb to stay in, which kind of kept our prices a little bit lower than they otherwise would have been. But because of all the markups, because this was such a high demand weekend, more people than normal were offering up their homes this weekend. So the one that we stayed in was definitely the most personal Airbnb I've ever been in. Just a lot of personal items, and you can tell that they normally lived here and that they just rented it out this weekend because it was a high demand weekend. That said, the cheapest available room at most of the hotels in the area was somewhere around $4,000 per night because everything, and I mean everything, was booked except for the most expensive suites. These aren't like the Ritz-Carltons. It was like $4,000 a night for like a regular Hilton. So all of this together really drove up the price of doing this event. So the total cost for the weekend, including flight, lodging, rental car, and obviously like the tickets, the food and drinks, was roughly $2,100. Hold on, is this right? Oh my God, that's literally how much I put as a down payment for the Viper. So I immediately regret totaling my costs now. So let's move on. So number 3, sleep deprivation, and if you're in Austin, Texas, bugs. Here's a clip from when I first arrived just to give you a better perspective.
Hello and welcome back. You might be wondering why my hair is so disheveled and why I am not in a normal filming location, and that is because I am in a motel room. And it's actually not that bad of a motel room as long as you exclude the dead roach in the corner. So I didn't get in until about 12:30 last night local time, which is about 1:30 a.m. Eastern time, which is where I'm from. As such, you can tell I'm a little disheveled, but we're here, we made it, and now I get to scratch an item off my bucket list this weekend. So I'm gonna try to look more like a presentable human again. I'm sure my hair is great right now, but let's get to it.
A lot of people see that I have a Viper and they assume that I'm like a super wealthy person. I am a very normal income person, I assure you. And if anything gave it away, it should be the absolute sticker shock I experienced a minute ago when I totaled everything up. So if you're also a relatively budget-minded and normal income person like I am, you're probably going to have to make some sacrifices as far as travel time to try to save some money on flights and keep this a more reasonable budget to do this weekend. You'll also probably have to make some sacrifices to your accommodations like I did here, especially if you're staying an extra day or two on each end to lower that flight cost. Basically, the weird travel hours and having a less than ideal bed are probably going to mean you're a little bit sleep deprived for at least part of the trip. So just be ready for that if you're trying to do this on a budget. Number 4, traffic. This applies to getting to the racetrack and leaving the racetrack. Like I said, 400,000 people in attendance over the 3 days. The amount of people in attendance definitely picked up as the weekend went on getting towards race day. If you're trying to make it to the events on time, expect there to be about an hour of traffic getting in and about an hour and a half of traffic leaving. Sorry to say, there's no way around it. You gotta deal with it. Plan accordingly. There was one guy who was trying to beat it using a bicycle with a flat tire, but this is how that went. And just like that, my content creation has absolutely peaked. Number 5, a limited view of the track. Okay, I get it. This is people's biggest complaint about going to a race in person versus watching at home. You do not get the close-up shots and the instant replays on a big screen in 4K from your spot on the bleachers, and you get that when you're sitting at your house. However, there is a screen on the infield that shows you what you can't see actively in front of you, and you see so much more action and these like minor duels and these little spats between drivers. All the action the cameras don't focus on when you're watching it remotely, you see that in person, and it's really cool, and you get a much more thorough experience and feel for how the drivers are really interacting. So pick your poison. Do you want to see all the action in high def up close all the time, or do you want to know what's generally going on and then see like a lot more of the nuances in person? Definitely worth experiencing at least once, gotta say that. Number 6, the heat. It gets very hot when you are sitting outside, especially if you are not in a section with shade. This definitely applies to Austin, but it also applies to most of the other tracks. It was mid-October and it was still like mid-80 degrees the entire weekend we were there. Plus it was also fairly humid, so it was like that sticky heat. It was a little bit miserable. Drink lots of water, wear lots of sunscreen, and we actually didn't want to wear our race gear because we said we're gonna wear the least amount of clothing possible. That sounds terrible now that I say it out loud. But anyway, that's why we're wearing like tank tops and shorts. Also a hat. Hats are good. You're gonna burn your head otherwise. Trust me, we figured that one out because somebody in our group is kind of bald. Also, the stadium sold out of water. We did do a Walmart run beforehand. We got like a 48 pack of water and brought our own.
I'm very familiar with the directions.
Fortunately, they do let you bring your own water into the racetrack, so top tip for the broke folks, buy your own, bring your own. Number 7, big money and high rollers. This should not come as a surprise based on the travel costs that I just told you guys, which I found a little ironic given the absolute income disparity in Austin. There were places like this within a couple blocks of places like this. As a result of that, you get a lot of very, very affluent people who come not just nationally, but internationally for this event. And a lot of people were not shy about flaunting it. For example, Mercedes had this like special edition green hat that they were selling at the racetrack. And like I said, it was blaringly hot, so a lot of the hats were selling out. This hat was $120. Now, we looked it up online. You could buy the same hat online for $55. 55! But you wouldn't have had it that day in person. So that hat was extremely common, and most of the people who had it were the type of people who, despite the fact that it was 85 degrees and humid, would have like a Louis Vuitton leather fanny pack on, and would have like a Gucci jacket over the top of their like $200 racing t-shirt. Like, come on, man, it's 85 degrees and humid. We all know you don't need a jacket because it's cold. Stop being a dick. There were plenty of those people around, but this really shouldn't come as a surprise because Formula One is one of the most high-dollar sports in the entire world. Think about it. It is some of the most impressive engineering done by man. It uses some of the most advanced aerodynamics and some of the most impressive and state-of-the-art materials, both in the vehicles and in some of the fans in attendance. And the camera doesn't really pick this up properly, but like this woman was 72% plasticized, and she was by far not the most plasticized person there. And I'm sure she was a nice woman, but you get my point, right? Is there was a lot of these types of people in attendants who maybe had a few too many injections over the years. And on that note, let's switch to some of the better parts. Number 8, a warm welcome. Starting with when you land in the airport, they already have a retired Formula One car there waiting for you. And partially because of the massive attendance numbers, there were race fans absolutely everywhere. I mean, everywhere we went, both in the airport, anytime we went out to a restaurant or to a bar, literally everywhere in the city was packed with race fans, most of which were wearing their favorite team's gear for the entire weekend, so they were very easy to spot. But this all created an incredible sense of community. People were all super approachable, everyone was very welcoming, they were all very outgoing, and honestly, it was a ton of fun. So here's the thing, I might bag on the plasticized woman, but if she was anything like 98% of the people we met there, she probably was super nice because everyone was there to share the same hobby, to have a good time, and to enjoy what we all love, which is racing. Anytime you were at breakfast, anytime you were at a gas station pumping gas, if you were wearing race gear, someone would strike up a conversation with you, and it was actually super cool to see. Because like I said, some people were here internationally, so you'd find out these people were coming from some like very far places to come to this race, and it was just really cool to see that locally and just how united everyone was. Furthermore, a lot of these people were car people, and they had a sense of humor, which means when we had our 122 horsepower Nissan Kicks rental car, we could try to do this.
I like what you're working with over there. You think you can handle this? She's strong. Shouldn't sound like much, but it'll
so
work.
yeah, did we try to incite a few drag races? Maybe. Did we lose every single one?
Chances might
Well,
be no for accelerating.
probably. Okay, inciting drag races with a Nissan Kicks probably wasn't like our most strategic move, but the thing is everyone had a really good sense of humor about it and everyone was just having a great time. The community as a whole just made this event so enjoyable and I will never forget that. Number 9, car spotting heaven. This goes hand in hand with how it was kind of a big money high rollers club and also having most of those people be car people. And honestly, this made all the traffic a lot more bearable. Even when we were stuck trying to get out of the parking lot for like an hour and a half, we were between one of the new C8 Corvettes, one of the Mach-E's, which quite frankly there weren't a lot of on the road at that time. Then there was like a ZL1 Camaro, there was an Aston Martin for a little bit, there was a few McLarens, and I gotta say, I saw more Lamborghini Uruses that one weekend than I have seen in the rest of my life collectively. Honestly, there were so many and so many different colors, it was like a pack of Skittles, but each Skittle cost like $250,000. It was incredible. And the same thing happened when we went into town for like dinner and drinks and stuff and we were bar hopping, and some of that is just like Austin in general has some very affluent people, but especially with the events that weekend and all the additional car people that were brought to the area, oh, it was a car guy's dream. I loved it. There was a McLaren Speedtail at the gas station, a Speedtail, and he was filling up at the gas station like one of us poor people with his hands. GT3 RSs galore. Oh, it was everything. And some of the people weren't shy about like revving it up if you asked them to as well. Oh, it was so great. Which brings me to number 10, exhaust note heaven. Let's be real here. We came for a weekend of listening to this. And the one car I'm specifically referring to that an owner like had no issue about revving up, when we were bar hopping one night, there was a C8 Corvette, one of the new ones, and I'm not really a Corvette guy, I'm gonna be honest with you, but a partially intoxicated me like signaled for him to rev up, and he did, and my god, that thing sounds so good in person. But we also got it from people in traffic and stuff too. There's a lot that I didn't catch on camera because we were actually just enjoying the experience, but all the cars both on and off the track sounded so good. It made that weekend so enjoyable. Moving on now to number 11, a full weekend of events. For anyone who doesn't know how Formula One works, you have the race Sunday, but you also have events on Friday and Saturday. There's 3 practice sessions and there's qualifying. So you have practice Friday, you have practice and qualifying Saturday, and then you have the race on Sunday. It's a full 3-day event, but on top of that, there's other races in between. So you have some of the other Formula series. So for example, depending on where you are, it could be Formula 3, Formula 4, Formula E. There's the women's Formula series. They also do the Pirelli hot laps where a bunch of the manufacturers go out with their cars and they take like VIPs and people who bought like pit lane passes, and they do flying laps in some of their like top flagship cars. So a bunch of the Ferraris, McLarens, and a lot of the top end AMG Mercedes out there. And let's just say that with passengers in their cars, those Mercedes drivers were getting freaking sideways lap after lap after lap. Those guys have balls of steel. Even just watching it from the stands, it was incredible to see. Those guys were really impressive. Pretty much every minute of track time is accounted for. They get as much use of the track as they reasonably can for the weekend, while obviously still maintaining safety and everything like that. But more than that, they also had a Billy Joel concert, and I was expecting it to be like, you know, some crappy opener for like an hour or two, and then Billy Joel comes out, he plays a few songs, maybe he does like an hour or so set, and that was the end of the night. But that wasn't what happened. He actually came on right away. There was no opener. It was only him that played. He played the full night. And honestly, Billy Joel's music style is just like not my musical style. But let me say, the dude still got it. He was absolutely killing it. They also had a bunch of different like displays and some carnival stuff on the infield. They had a few carnival rides. They had a Ferris wheel, and I can only describe some of these art displays as like Burning Man-esque. Like this. This was an octopus that just shot flames, but guess what? It was also a car. And this was a car that was like mostly cowhide, but the seat that I'm in right here, Shaquille O'Neal also sat in that seat, so I'm basically famous. But my personal favorite was this one, because it's a fish tank, and it's literally a rolling pun. I love that. That's so good. But the point is, this is a full weekend, and I mean a full weekend. Like, here's their schedule, which is why the sun and the heat was such a big deal. You can get there anywhere from early to mid-morning, and there is stuff to do until late at night. And then after that all ends, like, you could walk the track and stuff late at night too. So that was a super cool experience, like going up and seeing the braking markers up close and how big they are, like getting a feel for how big the curbs are, standing on the banking of the track. It was absolutely nuts to experience that. And then you go home, you get a couple hours of sleep, and then you go back the next day and do it again. It's 3 full days of that. So that also helps contribute to your sleep deprivation. So while there wasn't like a ton of Airbnbs and lodging available, it's not a huge deal, because honestly, you are so busy with this whole event, this whole weekend spectacle, and then going out to like bars or restaurants or whatever after, that you're pretty much going back to whatever your lodging is, and you're just crashing at the end of the day. So don't worry too much if you're not staying at like the nicest place ever, because you're really going to be filling your days at these events. And if for some reason these events aren't your thing, well, you can also just explore the city. Like I said, going out bar hopping. And one of my friends and I also checked out some cool driving roads, and they had this little lake that was hidden down like a small walking trail. We went and saw the Capitol. So even though I went before the event started and I left after it ended, there was still stuff to do the entire time. It was awesome. And this brings us to number 12, which is an easy one because it's a lifetime of memories. A Formula One race has always been a bucket list item for me. But for years, I was either unable to afford going or physically incapable of doing it. Or for a couple years, both. For anyone new to the channel, I had some pretty serious health concerns the last few years, and it really prevented me from doing a lot of the things that I wanted to do, and attending this race was one of those things. There was a while that I was very legitimately concerned that I would never have the ability again to travel and experience this to cross it off my bucket list. And to be honest, I'm super glad I did, because it wasn't just the race that made this experience incredible, it was also exploring a new region, seeing new places, trying new things, and meeting new people from literally all over the world with an immediate sense of community, and sharing these encounters with some of my best friends. It made for an absolutely unforgettable weekend that, frankly, we're going to look back on for the rest of our lives. So were the drinks at the track overpriced? In my opinion, yes. And did they run out of water bottles, making alcohol our only option at the track? Also yes. But did we have an absolute blast? Oh yeah. So let's be clear here. This is not the cheapest item on my bucket list by any stretch of the imagination. But this is probably the only opportunity that I had and that I may ever have to go to a Formula One race, especially for me to be able to attend one with a group of friends. And being there in person, seeing all the little driver spats on the track, the race feed and the highlight reel don't really cover, you know that these things happen in the same way that you know what an exhaust note sounds like from an F1 car by listening to a sound clip. But experiencing it in person, feeling that exhaust note reverberate through your bones, I mean, it literally shakes you to your core. It reverberates through your soul. It's something completely different than anything you've ever experienced, and quite frankly, I'm having trouble putting it into words. This was absolutely an expensive weekend, and that's why I didn't total up any of the costs prior to me starting to record the audio today. But if you have the means to do this, and if you have the opportunity to go, do it, because you're not going to regret it. You're never going to look back in your life and think, hey, remember that time that I stayed home all weekend and watched the F1 race highlights online? That's not going to be something that you ever reminisce about. But you'll definitely recall the time that you stretched your budget to cheer with the crowd, that you tried to drag race with a 122 horsepower Nissan Kicks with 4 passengers, and that you heard that sweet, sweet symphony of an F1 car fill your ears. And with that, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.